The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. Welcome back to the Nova Society, a space where dialogue deepens understanding and civic responsibility comes to life. I'm Dr. Mark Bound, joined by our regular panel, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon. Together, we'll unpack the stories that matter most, exploring the headlines, the history, and the big ideas shaping today's conversations. Let's dive in and hear what the panel has for us today.
Alrighty. Today we have a question from Peter, who writes to us from San Antonio, Texas. And Peter writes, last week, Spirit Airlines closed operations. Although Spirit sucked as a carrier, it did offer opportunities to many wanting a less cost prohibitive option for air travel. So, and I'm sorry, I have a lot of questions. I want to ask the panel, what does Spirit Airlines collapse reveal about the fragility of the ultra-low-cost carrier model in today's economic environment? There was a plan for JetBlue to take over Spirit. Did federal regulators unintentionally contribute to Spirit's downfall by blocking the merger? Are regulators protecting competition or preventing struggling carriers from finding lifelines? What does Spirit's shutdown mean for ticket prices nationwide? How will Spirit's closure reshape the competitive landscape for other budget carriers? What lessons should policymakers draw from this collapse? Does the U.S. need a more resilient aviation strategy, or is this simply market forces at work? How does Spirit's shutdown intersect with broader economic signals, rising fuel costs, inflation, and shifting travel demand? Should the federal government have intervened to stabilize Spirit, or would that have set a dangerous precedent for corporate bailouts? Wow. Excellent questions, Peter. Quite a few,
there's a lot
and
there.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you, Peter. Mark Scott?
I'll say this: all major passenger airlines spent over, get this, $5 billion on jet fuel in March, which is up 1.8 billion or 56% of what they spent in February. So I think that's probably what happened to Spirit Airlines. I'm just guessing. I know it was never the most solid of airlines. I think I may be getting this wrong, but I think I was actually flying Spirit once, and it was like there was some kind of bizarre delay that had nothing to do with the usual reasons that there were delays. And I called their like help desk to see what I could do to get onto another plane or go somewhere else. I don't remember all the circumstances, but I do remember this very clearly. The woman on the other end of the plane said, well, it was a cheap ticket. I was just like, wow. I'm grateful for the cheap ticket, but I didn't realize I was going to be giving up my rights to actually get where I wanted to go with that ticket when I bought that cheap ticket. And if I had gone with Delta or some other carrier, I would have been better off. Who knew? And I guess that's market forces, right? But yeah, the increase in the cost of jet fuel is the reason this happened. It is not because of the merger, the proposed merger between JetBlue and Spirit that was stopped, by the way, by a federal judge.
Right.
Not the Lena Khan during the Biden administration. They had good reasons to not want that deal to go through.
Yeah, and Peter, I don't know. I'm making the assumption that you have flown Spirit Airlines because you say they suck as a carrier. Okay, I have never had the pleasure or displeasure of having been on Spirit Airlines, so I really don't know. I know JetBlue is not like my favorite. I got stuck on one once, and if Spirit's worse, then ouch.
And it is.
Ouch! Ouch!
Yeah. I mean, I think I remember a story of somebody on JetBlue getting stuck on the tarmac without being able to go back to the gate for like 18 hours or something like
Oh
that.
my
And
God!
Spirit Airlines is worse than that.
Oh gosh. Okay. Go Delta. I have to admit I'm a big fan of Delta, KLM, and Lufthansa. But anyway, um, I agree with Scott. The idea of the merger being blocked, that was not by an administration. That was a judge's ruling, and that had to do a little bit with antitrust, but there was a few other issues that were involved in that basically had that collapse. Um, this does show, and as Scott pointed out, the cost of jet fuel. These other airlines, JetBlue, and there's a couple of other ones. I think one's called Breeze. There's one out there called Breeze. I've
Yeah.
been reading about. They're all.
Breeze flies out of New Haven now. I didn't even know
Oh,
there was an airport in New Haven.
well, there you
So,
go. But yeah, this really does impact a lot of them, because they just don't have the finances available to combat these higher prices. So it's really going to come down to who can weather the storm. And when I got this question, my first thought was here in Greenville Spartanburg International. Believe it or not, we have an international airport here. Um, we have United, but most of them are small carriers that are associated with United. So I don't know how that relationship works. Does United pay for the fuel, or does this small carrier pay for the fuel? How any of that works? They've got the name United on them, but how connected they are together, I don't know. So that again, that's another interesting question. But yeah, this does show that if you're one of those budget carriers, and I get it, you're making it accessible. It's a business model that can work, but it is very susceptible to these fluctuations in things like fuel. I mean, and you are really vulnerable to them compared to the really big carriers like Delta. Delta's probably going to raise their prices, absolutely. But then again, with these other smaller, economy carriers going out the window and maybe closing down, they now basically have created a situation where fly us or not, walk. That's what Delta can basically say. And, I don't think it's regulators protecting anybody. I really don't. I think ticket prices are going to continue to go up, not because Spirit Airline closed down. I think it's going to go up because the gas prices have gone up. This is a great excuse for them to raise prices. There's no doubt about that. And, it's just like every other business that's controlled by a corporation. If there's an excuse that they can pass on a cost, even if it's a real cost or imaginary, they're going to do it, and that's what you're going to see here.
so I also think that there's this. JetBlue, the proposal was that JetBlue was going to spend $3.8 billion to acquire Spirit Airlines. JetBlue has not turned a profit in 6 years, and it's $9 billion in debt. I have JetBlue. I have a JetBlue credit card, and I have JetBlue. I have a lot of JetBlue points, which I am going to use as quickly as possible because I don't think JetBlue is going to be around all that long. And I think that if that merger had gone through, that both of them would be gone right now. The Spirit would have been absorbed into JetBlue, and JetBlue would have been the one to go, well, we can't afford the fuel anymore, so we're going out of business. I think it's ridiculous that these airlines can't be profitable, because I've been on them enough to know that they've really stripped down everything that you could possibly strip down. Even Delta, I heard, had giving out peanuts and stuff like that on flights because it was costing them too much money, and they couldn't afford fuel if they were giving out free Cokes and peanuts on flights. The only question I would have is, are you allowed to bring your own? Which would make flying so much better.
Oh gosh, yes, because then you can stop at like Jersey Mike's or something and bring it on with you. Hey, you're
Yeah,
good to go.
or the liquor store, which I think is
It's
it
just,
would help a lot more people enjoy the flight, especially
absolutely.
especially when you're on JetBlue and you're hoping to watch something on the TV that's in front of you and it doesn't work.
Yeah. I think
That's
one of
one
the
frustrating flight.
um and let us use our iPads so we can like watch videos. Don't try to tell us that we can bring the plane down with Excel, because
Right.
that's just bullshit. I mean, come on, turn off all your electronics. It has nothing to do with it.
And
Um,
and I also just recently read that Spirit Airlines has filed for bankruptcy twice before.
right.
Yeah. So I think you got to be pretty tough dude to get into the airline business.
Now you got to know what you're doing. I think one of the
If
interesting questions from this is what lessons should policymakers draw from this collapse? Does the U.S. need a more resilient aviation strategy, or is this simply market forces at work? My question to you, Peter, is can you please identify to me what the policymakers' aviation strategy is here in the United States? Because I got thinking about that when I was reading it, and I was like, I don't think we even have one. In all honesty, I can't put my finger onto there being a U.S. policy as to an aviation strategy. They've just basically
No,
yeah,
left it up to the carriers,
it's a free market
I
thing. I
mean,
would
free market thing.
Reagan privatized. I mean, Reagan let it go to to privatization, as far as I know. Right? It used to be
Well, Reagan's
right.
big thing was the air traffic controllers.
Okay, all right,
That
not
was
the
Reagan's big thing.
airline
Right.
industry itself. Okay,
Right.
because I know Reagan privatized a lot of stuff, and that used to be under more federal control, and that people were concerned about what happened with quality, because of training and
Right.
experience.
And that was
Right.
during the air traffic controller strike, who were all basically under federal control, and Reagan threatened to bring in basically scabs.
Yeah. And there were also the TSA. The
Right.
TSA at one point that job was provided by the airlines.
Correct.
Is a job that the airlines had, and then I guess because the federal government felt that the airlines weren't, stopping enough people from getting on the planes with box cutters and stuff like that, that they formed the TSA. And as a result of that, there's a federal agency under the Department of Homeland Security that safeguards air travel. I think they want to undo that by doing away with that part of the Department of Homeland Security and having the airlines take over that job again, or some other entity like a private company would be in charge of that.
So do we think that? And I'm just waiting for the time somebody comes out in government and says air travel is a function of national security. If we don't have it, we need it. It's national security. Should the United States really have a policy, aviation strategy and policy, and take some of that away from the carriers? I mean, is that what we think maybe should happen? Because, like I say, the United States is a continent, and for us to conduct business the way we conduct it, we need air travel, and we need air travel to be reliable. Is this something that there should be a policy that we've never thought of before? And has this crisis basically signaled the fact that somebody needs to start thinking about this?
Aren't federal air marshals aren't
Yeah, but
they on every?
those are marshals. Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's
I
a
mean,
federal. I mean, isn't that part of a federal policy for something? And they're on international flights, correct? Not on domestic flights. And wouldn't that be part of a federal policy for something?
Well, it's a TSA. You got all sorts of examples.
so I don't like invoking the name of the president of Brooks' favorite president, so I won't say anything about the name. But he has shown.
How about my least
he,
favorite president?
he has shown a willingness to get government involved in business right? With whether it's Intel or it's with some of the other things that he's grabbed a piece of.
Oil.
And well, yeah, I mean, I guess the big, so this is where I'm going with this. What if we had an energy policy that kept, what if we nationalized an oil company? And this would be the last thing on earth that conservative Republicans would want. But that's why this guy is the only guy who could actually pull this off, because they seem to bend their principles anytime he says that they need to bend their principles. So we nationalize an oil company and we give airlines discounted fuel so that they don't have to worry about rising fuel costs. We cap the cost of fuel for airlines so that airlines don't have, because the bottom line here, I think, is that these airlines are teetering on the brink all the time. I'm not exactly sure why that is. Like I can't tell you the last time I was on an empty plane. It might have been a very, very long time ago. When I used to fly a lot. I don't fly that much anymore, and I have no desire to fly anywhere but Puerto Rico in the next 2 weeks. But the idea of, like, this airline was in big trouble before. JetBlue's in big trouble and is in big trouble now. We should, not forget that. And that the cost of fuel is what tipped them over. And the Republican, Sean Duffy, can go on TV and complain about Pete Buttigieg and Lena Khan and Joe Biden and, just name random Democrats. He could say John F. Kennedy and LBJ and you could just start talking about Democrats, and that, but that's not actually going to get the job done.
Don't forget about FDR.
FDR, yeah. The Zoran Mondani. The idea there is that if you can't run an airline profitably, and they don't seem to be able to do that. I don't know if the other airlines are run profitably.
Remember the casinos in Atlantic City.
Yes. I agree that I have a lot of trouble with this idea that I am proposing right now for that reason. And among other reasons where there's too much government overreach, and I didn't grow up in a country that had nationalized stuff other than parks and schools and things like that. But it might actually be the right remedy for this particular problem.
Yeah, it's possible. And then maybe they could nationalize the peanut industry so that when we got our little bag of peanuts, it'd have more than two of them in the bag. That would be kind of nice on top of that.
I mean, you look at, so if we're willing, that guy is willing to take a piece of the computer chips, and then what he ends up doing is sells them to China, which really, we want to prevent that from happening. And nobody's squawking about that, right? I don't hear any Republicans complaining about it. I haven't heard many Democrats talking about it. Then what would stop us from nationalizing an oil company, having an oil refinery that is mandated to refine oil into gasoline for the use of the United States alone, and not,
how long it would take to build a refinery? Sorry, I know I cut you off. It would take a long time to build a refinery.
That's fine. I don't know, other than driving by the Jersey Turnpike, I've never had to smell an oil refinery. I'm assuming that's what that is over there. But the idea, like, we need this, as long as we're gonna stay, like in Europe and other places, they're all going to electric vehicles. Like, they're going like mad for electric vehicles. We have stalled that here. We're not subsidizing them anymore. And we're not manufacturing them anymore. And we've fallen on our face when it comes to EVs. So why don't we just deal with the fact that we're not a competitive country when it comes to electric vehicles or green energy, and just embrace the fact that we are a gas guzzling, cheap flight. We want what we want, and we just nationalize that to get it. and fuck the environment and the future and children, grandchildren, and all that kind of stuff. And we'll just go ahead and nationalize certain industries that will benefit the people. And that, you know what, we could expand it into slaughterhouses and food production and farms and things like that, and just make sure that we have what we need here. Because I do kind of long for the days of cheap things. Yeah, I went out. My daughter insisted that we go out for Cinco de Mayo yesterday, which is the most bizarre thing in the world to do, right? First of all, Cinco de Mayo is a made-up holiday. Second, we went to a Mexican restaurant on the one day a year that they raise their prices because they can, because the place is mobbed. And we spent, three of us, $180 on a couple of margaritas and some beans and cheese and not much else. It was really disgusting, and the whole thing left me with a bad taste in my mouth. But all I could think was, I miss inexpensive stuff. I miss cheap stuff. And we don't have cheap stuff here anymore. And how do we get back to having cheap stuff? And the only way that I can think to do that is by nationalizing things. I know it's going to sound to a lot of my Republican friends like socialism, but if their guy proposes it, I think they'll go along with it.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I agree. I mean, I agree with the concept of the United States should have one nationalized entity for many of the sectors that we're talking about here. Now, that does not mean we can't have the private sector involved, but it gives something for the private sector to compete against. Sort of like, Medicare.
Yeah, dare I say the public option from Obamacare that never made it in
Exactly.
would be a good deal.
That's right. So you could fly the national airline at this amount, and if these other airlines want to compete, okay, so be it. Now compete against the national airline. And I think, that may be the strategy we're looking at. And that could be the same thing with one oil company, just one oil company. Don't need them all, just one. And now you got all you other oil companies compete against that. And it may make the national oil company or airline may come out on top. If they did, that's good for the people. At least it should be. And if not, it still is existence, and it sends a counterbalance to, and it creates an incentive, let's say, for those other companies, airlines and oil companies, to continue to keep prices at a point where they're reasonable. And I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And the last question that was asked is, should federal government have intervened to stabilize Spirit Airline? The answer is no. No, we've done that. We've done that so often, and I just cannot see why we would possibly want to do that.
So there was talk of doing that, right?
Yeah, they were going to do $500 million.
So why did he back off on that? Why did Trump?
Because he wouldn't name it Trump Airlines.
He got failed. His airport. How about that? My wife now refuses to fly into West Palm Beach. She said, I don't care if I have to fly to Orlando to visit her parents who are up in Hobe Sound. And I'm like, that's like a 5-hour drive. And she goes, I'm not flying into West Palm Beach. If it's named after Trump, I'm not flying there.
The only problem with the scenario of nationalizing and doing stuff to help the people, the regular person in the United States, is that the orange guy in the office, who is not my favorite president, has no interest in helping any regular American. Quite the opposite from what we have seen.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll go with that. But the fact is that this could be a real windfall for the federal government.
Oh, certainly.
I mean, it could be if it's managed properly. Now, we've shown, and I understand the argument that a lot of people have, the federal government can't manage themselves out of a paper bag. I totally get that. They are the worst at managing things. I get it. But if we had proper independent management of these things, if we had proper independent management of Medicare, you wouldn't have to worry about it. If we had proper independent management of Social Security, you wouldn't have to worry about it. I mean, the post office, for all the grief the post office takes, it gets no money from the federal government. It's none. And it's existed forever. So that may be the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, right. So what I'm reading here, it seems like everybody is blaming the Biden administration, Lena Khan, Pete Buttigieg, all the Democrats for this. It says here, the Justice Department proved in court that a merger between JetBlue and Spirit would have caused tens of millions of travelers to face higher fares and fewer choices. We want to enforce the antitrust laws. So that I get. I understand that less competition means higher prices. Unless, and this is the big step forward here that I think that guy could do, is unless you nationalize these industries. And let me just see when,
or at least nationalize one of them. Just one entity that the private sector has to compete against.
I mean, it's tragic. 17,000 people lost their jobs who worked for this airline. They're not all going to find jobs in other airlines, even though I think JetBlue has already gone in and started buying up their airplanes and buying up their routes and stuff like that, But again, if the price of fuel continues to rise and rise and rise, and it looks like it will for the foreseeable future, none of these airlines are going to be profitable, and they're all going to go into debt, and they're all going to be teetering on the brink of bankruptcy all the time. You got to come up with a remedy for it. It may not be choice A. It may not even be choice B.
Yep.
It may not even be choice C. But you know what? Sometimes D is the right answer. And if D is socializing or socialism and government takeover of certain industries,
so
maybe it's time.
Okay. Peter, hopefully answer that.
Well, with the orange guy, it'll be choice B for bankruptcy, which is how he lost all his casinos and everything else he did, and why we're in the economic situation that we're in. So I have no faith that whatever decision is made is going to be the correct one, given that we're in Iran and we created this situation in the first place.
Okay.
I think Mark is done. With this topic.
I'm done with the topic.
Well, the topic's not done with us.
All right, I'll tell you what. It's done with me. When you're done, click stop the record.
All right.
So Peter. Yeah, I'm sure that we answered your question.
I'm positive.
I certainly appreciate the question, and I know that Mark and Scott do as well. So thank you.
Absolutely. We do, and we need better CEOs. We need better leaders of these companies. Maybe that's the real thing.
We need better lots of stuff. Anyway. And that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We want to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing team, Apple Podcasts, the largest source of podcast and music online, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your destination for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. And most importantly, we want to thank you, our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society could not be possible. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing on the platform of your choice. It's easy, it's free, and helps our channel grow. For questions or comments, you can reach us at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So on behalf of Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Scott Gershworth, and all of our production partners here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power of society is knowledge. Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you again next time.
Hi, everyone. This is JJ, the co-founder of Good Pods. If you haven't heard of it yet, Good Pods is like Goodreads or Instagram, but for podcasts. It's new, it's social, it's different, and it's growing really fast. There are more than 2 million podcasts, and we know that it is impossible to figure out what to listen to. On Good Pods, you follow your friends and podcasters to see what they like. That is the #1 way to discover new shows and episodes. You can find Good Pods on the web or download the app. Happy listening!